Welcome to Aurelia's Virtual Book Club. We have BK Rivers here because we're reading her romance, Raining Down Rules. So, welcome.
Thank you.
um, so, what led you to writing?
Reading, actually. I never really wanted to be a writer. I stopped reading after third grade, and basically, I think I can count on one hand the number of books I did read until I was 25, maybe, and I don't know, one of my friends invited me to a book club in my neighborhood that I lived in, and I looked at her and I said, you do know that I don't read, right? And she's like, yeah, well, you don't have to read the book to go to book club. It's just, a bunch of girls getting together and talking. I was like, all right. So I went for a few months and tried reading a few of the books. And then that same friend gave me a book, and it was The Goose Girl by Shannon Hale.
I've read that book. I love that book. That book is based off of my favorite fairy tale of all time.
It is a wonderful book. And I was like, all of a sudden, it was like this cloud lifted from my head. It was like, look, there is a book that you like and you can read it. And ever since then, I basically have not stopped reading. I'll read one book a day, sometimes two. And I think after, I don't know, a few months of reading consistently, I was like, you know what? Now I have stories in my head that need to come out, and they wouldn't leave me alone. And I'd sit in bed and be like, these thoughts were just going through my head. And eventually I just started kind of writing them down, and came up with a few stories here and there, and finished one book, and kept writing more, and then went and wrote this book that's published last year, and it's kind of where it went.
That sounds really similar to like my process, only the timeline is different. I was imagining the stories when I was little, but I didn't start reading until I was I don't know, I was like 7.5 or something. It was the summer, so it must have been 7.5, because it was summer for me in between first and second grade, and I started first grade right before I turned 7. And then I didn't start really considering writing down any of the stories that were in my head until I was about 12 and a half. So it took the reading sort of happened first for me as well. Yeah. And I definitely The Goose Girl is my favorite fairy tale. Have you read the Grimm's version of it?
I have not. I should, because I tell you, I think I've read it 4 or 5 times now, and you always find something different. And when I first read it, I was drawn to young adult fantasy, and started writing some of my own, and quickly realized that I'm not a world builder.
Yeah.
I would love to be able to build a world, but someday maybe I will.
Would you write a young adult fantasy in someone else's world?
Maybe, just because to me, I need a map. I need to see where these places are, and I've tried, drawing my own, and sometimes it translates all right. But I still kind of get lost in the story and the scenery. And so if someone else had already had a world built and needed, a story written, or maybe a continuation of a story, I could probably do something of that nature. But I'm not sure if I'm like start from scratch fantasy capable, though I would love to, because I still love reading fantasy.
Yeah. So what inspired Raining Down Rules? What was the idea spark?
So for me, most of my writing inspiration comes from music. So it's not necessarily the words or the band. It's more like an image that pops in my head. or sometimes a character will pop in my head and they'll give me like the opening sentence to a story, and it'll take off from there. Raining Down Rules was an image that came to my mind and developed after that. And it basically was starting in my hometown where I grew up, which is a teeny tiny town. And I had seen this image of a guy walking down the street with no shoes on. And he was a rock star. And I thought, what would happen if, a rock star was drunk and high walking down the street, and one of his biggest fans happened to be driving past him and she stopped to help him. And I kind of just developed the story from there. I thought, would there be a romance that took place? Would there be fighting? What would happen if, these two met? And that's just how the story took off. And it, in a way, some of it took a life of its own. I didn't have control over some of it. It just kind of happened. But it was fun to write.
Yeah. So what did you ever get like stuck where you knew that something needed to happen, but you weren't sure what, and the characters weren't cooperating, and how did you handle that?
So I usually get stuck about 35,000 words in a book, and I don't know why, but it's just something that always happens to me. And I usually have to sit there for a long time and think of situations that could occur at that point in time of the book. And I'll run past a few ideas and then kind of see, okay, where would this go if this happened? In this case, insert the fireman because I knew he was going to be in the story. However, I didn't know the role he was going to play. And towards the middle of the book, the roles changed. And so when I finished the book and went back and reread it, I realized that I had to change up the beginning in order to make the book the way it should be at the end. And so that was a little bit of a struggle because I had to go through and rewrite a few chapters and make sure that, the beginning matched how I wanted the ending to be. And so that was an interesting plot dilemma at the time. But that's basically all I could do is go in and read it and rewrite what needed to be rewritten.
Yeah. So how did you get to know your main character?
Oh, that's a tough question. I usually do like a mini character profile, and which includes a picture of someone that I think looks like the person. I never base my character off of an actor. Like I don't sit there and think, okay, these traits are because of this actor and how they, act or they whatever. I usually come up with the image in my head and then search for someone that looks like that person, or when I look for, let's say, a blonde actress in her 20s. I'll go through and know what I know of my character, and then I'll find someone that looks like her. So once I get that image, a lot of times the story just starts taking place. So I usually come up with, their birthday, and then what is important dates that have happened throughout their life that maybe affect who they are. And I then come up with character quirks. So do they, do they have an eye twitch? Do they tug on their jaw? What things do they do that's kind of a habit, so that way, it makes them more real. So it's just kind of a little basic plot. It's no more than, 7 or 8 bullet points that I do for each person. But that's how I work it, I suppose. Sometimes things happen in the middle of the book that change them a little bit, so I have to go back and tweak it. But for the most part, I can get them nailed down at the beginning.
Yeah. So what's your favorite quirk about her?
Um, so with Gemma, she, I like that she is really a loyal person. She, because of her situation growing up where her father left her with her grandmother to be raised, she's kind of had to cope with feeling that abandonment. But yet her grandmother stepped in, of course, to be her mother, essentially. And I love that she just clung to her grandmother and loved her like a mother. And I feel like she was just someone that most people could relate to, because people in a situation like hers would probably feel similar. And so I think that, she was strong, and she's not an easy person that you gain her trust very easily. But she is a strong person. So I like that about her. The book is written in dual perspective. So then you have Jordan, who is the rock star, and he's been fun to write, because he comes back in book 2, and he in book 1, you see his struggle with addiction, and I've never dealt with addiction personally, so I don't know, how it would affect me personally, but writing him and just feeling the struggles as a character, it was fun, and it was challenging, and I feel like he's an interesting character. And so, it's different to write someone that experiences something that you have never experienced.
Yeah. That's one of the things I like about reading, is that you get to experience things that you would never otherwise get to experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I read a lot of fantasy.
Yeah.
So, like I always come back to fantasy examples. Like in fantasy, you can have characters that like live forever, or they live
Yep.
a really long time, and then you get to explore, okay, if you live forever, how does your sense of time change? How
Mm-hmm.
does your sense of like urgency change?
Yeah.
How does your sense of spending the time to get all the details right change? Um, and I think that's true of addiction and other things as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like my brother's bipolar, and I was watching Silver Linings Playbook, which is all about someone who's dealing with that.
Yeah.
Um, and I was really impressed because they did it really well and they got it right. And it was really interesting to see, okay, so my brother is a kid still, and we're like helping him figure out how to deal with that. And so it's not going to be like that for him, but that's
Right.
what it could be like if nobody knew about it. And that's true for most people. Like most bipolar people don't get diagnosed with it until they're in their 20s or 30s.
Hmm.
Um, so it was really, yeah. Now I'm looking forward to reading about it to find out how he handles all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's you can see the struggles he has, and then in book 2, you get a little bit of different side of him, so that it was even more fun to write him in book 2. So
Yeah. That's exciting. So, why a fireman as opposed to like an EMT?
because his cousin's an EMT.
Oh, okay.
um, the town that I grew up, it has a really, really strong fireman program. They do, and it may be true all over the United States, I don't know, but they have a high school program where you can become a volunteer fireman through in high school. And so it's something that I had several friends that went through the program. So I think it kind of felt like natural for me to gravitate towards that because of the town that it's set in. And it just something that I'm fairly familiar with as far as different issues and whatever. But so I think that's probably why he was a fireman, or else it could have just been that, the character popped up and he said, "Hey, look, I'm a fireman." So
Yeah. Does the town is the town in a place that has high fire hazards?
it does. It's a farming community. And
Okay.
so you're always, in the summers with thunder and lightning storms and whatever with the dry fields. It's always got fires happening. And so yeah, it's a lot of activity.
Yeah. So, there are so many things that I could ask.
Well, and you don't want to do any, well, are you showing
No.
this when your book club has finished reading the book?
No, this is anyone who has the links can find it and watch it whenever they want.
Okay, so we don't want to do too much
We don't want to
spoilers.
do too much spoilers. Mm. Hmm. So, what did you learn about your own experiences in your hometown by writing the story?
So I realized how much I miss living there. I don't think I could actually go back and live there because it's so small. And after moving to Phoenix and living here for 15 years now, it's too small, but I miss the community feel of it and how everybody kind of just knows everybody. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing that I learned. Learned that, I shouldn't say I learned, I remember that when one person knows your business, everyone knows your business. So there's that aspect of the small town. But I think that's the biggest thing is that it's just, I do miss bits and pieces of it. And in my head, I always picture it as a really green, lush place. However, when I do go back to visit, it's not necessarily quite like I remember. And it's probably because Phoenix is so dry, and I just, think the opposite of where I grew up. So
I came across an NIH study that someone did, and they were looking at women and the effect of like greenery on like lifespan, and apparently it like decreases, living around greenery decreases your mortality rate by 12%.
Very interesting.
So I grew up in California and I hate how dry it is here.
Yeah.
And like the movies show all the green parts. It's
Yep.
like a month in February and that's it.
Well, and I've got, where I live now, you wouldn't think it was Arizona because I have a jungle in my neighbor's backyard. And they have about 50 trees that are massive. And so it's very green back there. And so it is kind of nice because with the land comes green because I cannot not have grass. So
yeah. But it's definitely interesting how the level of greenery changes. Almost it changes your attitudes towards things sometimes. So I definitely can relate to remembering things differently than how they really were.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember winters in California being like muddy and brown and wet because it would be raining all the time, but it's been in a drought so long. But the drought started when I was away at college, so like now I'm here. I'm like, it's winter?
Yeah.
It like looks like it's summer. What?
Yep.
So, so it's a romance.
Yep.
So what led you to write romance, having started out being interested in young adult fantasy?
I think that when I write, whether it's young adult or new adult, I automatically gravitate towards the romance. And I'm not a graphic romance author, if that makes any sense. I'm not comfortable writing that, and I don't plan on it. However, I do enjoy, the the happily ever afters and the feelings of, I don't know, I guess there is the ups and downs of the romance. And the more I've read it, the more I kind of study the way romance is written, and you see a trend with how the flow of the book goes. So it's interesting to see how everyone's take on that is. And mine don't necessarily fit the mold, which is kind of interesting and fun. But I love watching the characters fall in love, I guess, and to have some, like in the third book in the series that I'm writing, the characters have quite the issues, and it's at the point where the male main character is realizing that he maybe is falling in love with a female character, and it's been a little bit of an emotional ride for me to write. And I'm not a crier when I read. I think there's probably been 2 or 3 books that I've ever cried while reading. And this book 3 that I've been working on, I've cried almost 3 times writing it, and which is a really weird experience. And so I think for me, it's the emotional parts of the romance that really draw me to writing it. And even though, like I said, I'm not a crier, I enjoy watching.
We have an invasion of a cat right about now.
Aw. You saying hello.
Hi, cat. This is the Internet of Cats interlude right here.
Of course. It wouldn't be the internet without one.
All right. Do cats make an appearance in your book?
You know, they don't. However, there are horses in book 1 and a dog in book 3. So there is a little bit of animals.
I apologize for any crackling that occurs because the cat is trying to attack the microphone. So let's see. So it's a little town, and there's this rock star, and then there's a fireman. And I haven't started the book, so like if I say something and it's a spoiler, you're not allowed to react because I don't know if it's a spoiler or not.
All right.
So is there a reason for this rock star to be in this tiny little town?
So he doesn't necessarily start in a tiny little town. He's actually in a town that's a little bit of a drive away. He just had kind of like a here's your last chance concert. The band has been really on the downhill for quite some time because of Jordan's addictions. And instead of playing the normal, massive venues they've been playing since they became famous, it's slowly dwindling down to where it's just the small towns. Well, I shouldn't say small, but smaller venues. And he is at this smaller venue and does a concert. And at the end of the concert and at the end of the night, he's got himself in a situation. And that's when Gemma stumbles upon him and picks him up and brings him to her hometown. So he, in his line of thinking, he's pretty much saying, hey, you kidnapped me. And she's like, hey, you got in my car willingly. And,
Yeah.
And so that's basically the way it happens. And just have to kind of read to find out which direction it goes.
Yeah. So what should we be most excited to discover as we read Writing Down Rules?
I think that you'll find that in a way there is a little bit of a love triangle. However, it's not really your typical love triangle where, it's, let's just leave it at that. It's not your typical love triangle. And I think that you would be surprised possibly at how the ending goes, though maybe not. And I think that as you read on, the reason why Gemma is who she is when it comes out, I think surprises a lot of people. It's an emotional situation, and people have experienced what she's experienced. However, everyone handles it differently, and this is the way she chose, is the way, carves her into who she is. So I think that's probably where the most surprises are, is the love triangle and why she is who she is.
Yeah. I'm excited. I'm excited to find out all about all of this. Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It was fun.
So where can people find you?
So I'm Facebook. I've got a author page. It's bkrivers.author. So Facebook, .com/bkrivers.author. You can like me there, or else you can reverse the order and be my friend on Facebook. So it's facebook.com/bkrivers. Stop that. Hold on. Author BK Rivers. Okay. And that way you can be my friend, though, that you get the same information on both pages. My website is bkrivers.com. And on Twitter, I'm at Writer Rivers. And so those are my 3 big hangouts. I'm on, Pinterest and Instagram too. So, but those are pretty much where I hang out.
Awesome. Well, hopefully you'll be able to come to the discussion too at the end of the month.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to.
And then we can talk about spoilers as much as we
can. Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.